Notes on them. If you're going to take one and pass them along, that'd be awesome. Thank you. And also, paper for notes. So, you guys hear me back there? Is this decent in terms of audio? Okay, cool. The mics are kind of tethered, so it's a bit difficult. So welcome to the panel. Thank you very much for showing up. So 2 years ago, I talked to some friends about wanting to go to Japan. We've been Otaku for the longest time, and you know how that goes. Oh, we should totally go, let's do it, and it never actually happened. So I kept telling folks, we need to do this, we need to do this, and finally I said, I'm just going to set up a day, and I'm going to schedule a week, and then you all come if you can. I had one friend who thought he could make it, he couldn't, so I ended up going to Japan alone. I can't speak Japanese except for a few words. I don't really know Japanese or read Japanese. So it was an adventure. I was there for 10 days, solo. All I had were hotel reservations and flight reservations, basically. So I'm going to talk about my experiences here, but also I'm going to try to sort of expand that into just sort of general advice based on what happened to me. Since I haven't been there, dozens of times, I can't say, always do this. But there are certainly things that happened to me that I can provide you with some advice about. So, sort of a bunch of different things here. So, first off, how to get there. There are two main airlines that go, United or All Air. One big thing here, if and when you fly, sign up for their frequent flyer program ahead of time, because the miles you get just on this trip might be enough to pay for a domestic flight. It's that many miles to Japan. So that's really helpful to do. Flights are going to be fairly expensive, obviously, but you can certainly get them, and one of the nice things is, they're flying the 787 now over to Japan, so it's a really nice new aircraft. So you will certainly get good stuff. This is actually a picture from my seat. You get complete entertainment systems in the back of every seat, even in coach. It's just really nice. Giant overhead bins. It's class, and lots of Asian movies. Which is fun, something like that. So, on the way back, I watched a Bollywood zombie movie. It's awesome, actually. So, how do you book a hotel in Japan? Oh, by the way, feel free to ask questions as I go, all that kind of stuff, that's fun. So this website, which is not showing up correctly. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. This website solves our problem precisely. I.e., we cannot write Japanese or necessarily read Japanese, but we need to book a hotel. It is an English language website for booking hotels in Japan, and they go all the way from completely Western style business hotels all the way to ryokan, the traditional Japanese hotels. You can book all of them there. They have thousands upon thousands of them on the site, which is really nice. And they will tell you a few things, particularly, which is rather important, whether the staff speaks English. It is not worth going to a hotel where they don't, because so many do. Now, granted, this is high school level English. It's not fluency, but you can absolutely talk back and forth. That's not a problem at all. And it's just definitely worth going. It's also very nice to know it has a coin laundry. For a couple of reasons. One is that, in the 10 days that I was there, Japan was hit by 3 monsoons. So it can be rainy, it can be muddy, it can be a bit of a mess. Also, it means that you can bring less in the way of clothing and wash it. And I'll get to why here in a minute. So you've got to schedule when you're going to go. Times to go, I went in October, which turned out to be a really good time because rates are relatively low and Japan is still tempered at that time. So I went around in, basically this, short sleeved jeans all the time, and it was perfectly comfortable. It was high 60s at the lowest. So it was a very convenient way of doing things. But definitely want to handle that ahead of time, and be aware that you're going to cross the international date line. A month before I went, I realized I didn't have a hotel for my last day in Japan. That was fun. So I was able to scramble and find something, but I realized I'd gotten one day off between getting there and coming back, and I'm leaving 2 days before I get there, all that kind of good stuff. Then you'll probably want your Japan Rail Pass if you're going. This is a pass that gets on 98% of the trains in Japan, excepting the subways. And this is the way of getting around in Japan in general, not just city to city, but also within the cities. This is an absolutely wonderful way of getting around. It's a fairly expensive, it's going to be a couple $100s. You can get it in 7, 14, and 21-day increments. The problem is, you cannot buy a Japan Rail Pass in Japan, and you cannot buy a Japan Rail Pass outside of Japan. So what you have to do is pre-order one. They mail you a voucher to your home address. You take the voucher with you to Japan, and then at a Japan Rail desk, you hand in your voucher, and they set up a Japan Rail Pass and give it to you. The advantage being that it then switches on at that second. So there's no amount of, okay, I'm going to get there on this day, so start on this day. It always starts as soon as you hand over the voucher. The important thing, though, is to do that ahead of time. You don't want to do that 3 days ahead of time, and oh, it hasn't arrived in my mailbox yet. I'm screwed. The other nice thing about the JR Pass is that it will get you free ride on any train that the JR Pass covers, including things like reserved cars, things you normally otherwise have to pay for. The JR Pass will get you on all of those. You will need, if you want to use a, so most trains will have a reserved and non-reserved seating set of cars. And so the reserved cars, you still need to reserve a seat there, but you can just go to the desk when you arrive at the station and say, I want a seat on this car, please. And they will look at your JR Pass and say, yes, sir, or ma'am, and do that and hand you a ticket, completely free because you have the pass. So that's the other nice thing, is you can get on everything. There are like 2 or 3 of like the most recent Shinkansen bullet trains that the JR Pass doesn't apply to, but they're very rare, and you can get everywhere without them. That's not a big deal. But the JR Pass is a lifesaver, and also it is a nice thing to just go places on it. Yes, sir.
How many trips do you get, or how many times?
As many as you want. So if you have a 7-day pass, you can be on the train all day.
Just within like all of Japan?
Anywhere in Japan. Yep. Which is very nice. Yeah. Very, very handy. The other thing I would recommend is to. The other nice thing is they put off the neat little stamps on there, so you really can tell you're in Japan. The other thing is print off everything before you go. I had everything printed off in a document, where I was going, where I was staying, addresses, phone numbers, email, confirmation numbers, all that kind of stuff. Partly because AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, etc. are American companies. You are going to get no cell phone service in Japan unless you want to go on roaming. Roaming charges at the moment are between $15 and $40 per megabyte. And guess what happens when at 3 a.m. your phone says, hey, Angry Birds has a 50 megabyte download. This happens to people. So definitely, like when you get on the plane, just go into airplane mode and keep it there, unless you absolutely need it. And that's actually what I did, is I just kept my cell phone on airplane mode the entire time. Yes, sir?
Do you know about renting a SIM card in Japan?
So you can certainly do that. I did not do that because my phone at the time didn't support that. The folks I've read about who've done that said it is certainly doable if you're willing to do the research and do a lot of the stuff ahead of time to make sure you have, to make sure that you, that everything works when you get there. It is, they have said that it's a lot more complicated than just swapping in the card. So it's certainly something you can do, but there are a lot of steps to it. So again, I don't know, but for me, I found it was better to use the hotel Wi-Fi, and just do that, when I got home. And otherwise, I actually printed out maps of how to get from like the train station to the hotel and back and forth. That's certainly something you can do. You can also get a burner phone. So just get a Japanese phone that only will last for a month or whatever. Same kind of thing there. Folks say you can certainly do that, but it's a little more complicated. You have to switch into English, back and forth. So these are all certainly options. I just find it easier to just, not use my plan. Yes?
I think the newer Nokia maps that you can download as an alternative, they have a feature where you can download the maps that in the area ahead of time.
Yeah.
That's like really new, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the big advantages of Nokia Maps over Google Maps.
Yeah. So if you can do that, definitely do that. That's incredibly handy. The other thing to be aware of, by the way, if you do print out these things, is that the sign on the hotel will not use those letters. It's going to be in kanji or hiragana or whatever. So it's certainly good to have all this written down, but it may be better to also copy and paste the actual Japanese characters into your documents when you're walking down the street and you're looking, oh, that's those characters, that kind of thing. I didn't have a problem with it as it turned out, but that is one of those, oh yeah, they don't use these letters over there as much. Also, call your credit card company, because when you suddenly get a charge from Japan, they're going to say, oh, his card's been stolen, lock the card. And now you're in Japan, I have to make a phone call to America. It's really fun. Didn't happen to me, fortunately, but definitely make that phone call ahead of time, and the cards are very used to it. I mean, it's a 5-minute project. Also, it's very handy to have some yen with you. So I would advise getting some yen ahead of time. There are still a lot of merchants in Japan, especially street merchants, that are still cash only. So it's definitely advantageous to have some cash on you. I actually ended up doing it at ATMs in Japan, because then you avoid the fees of going to a currency converter over here in America or otherwise. You're just paying the ATM fee. The thing to be aware with that is that Visa, MasterCard, and Discover are all American companies. So there are ATMs which accept them, but they're not everywhere. For example, they are in most major train stations. If you wander around long enough, you're going to find one, especially in like major convenience stores, things like that. But it's not going to be every street corner. So I found one in Tokyo Station, which I'll get to in a second, and just kind of used that whenever I needed more cash. But it was very handy having actual cash on hand for a lot of things. Then, what to do when you're there. My favorite website for figuring out kind of where to go in Japan, we'll go there, is japan-guide.com. This turns out to be a very good sort of Wikipedia-ish travel guide for Japan. They have a lot of interlinking within the site, and a lot of suggestions on what to do, especially if you're in a city or in a town, you're going to spend half a day there, you want other things to do, great place to go. They also offer a variety of short like day tours, half day, single day, and I think up to 2-day trips to various places, like bus tours. There are some places where that is advantageous. I generally will go just do things myself, but there are some places which I'll get to where it's just nice knowing, okay, I'm going to show up at this hotel, and a bus is going to show up, and I'm going to get on it and go. So that is certainly an option. All right, here's how I packed for Japan. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of short skirts if you're a girl. You want to do this. Underwear, socks, and I wore jeans and let other people back on the plane. Why did I do this? Because my hotel room in Kyoto was 2 feet wider than the bed. That was the entire size of the hotel room. If I had big suitcases, there would have been no place to actually put them. There's no space. So I packed very light. The other advantage is that's more space for you to, say, stuff it with anime stuff and bring it back with you. That's also nice. So absolutely pack light, and then if you have a coin laundry in your hotel, you can spend an hour and 15 minutes there washing and drying your clothes, so you don't need all that many changes of clothes. I've seen people go to Japan with a giant suitcase. It's just like we had to put it like on the bed to deal with it, and then in the bathroom when we were not using it. I mean, there's just no other place to put it. So definitely pack light if you can. So here's where I actually went in Japan, 3 major places: Tokyo, Kyoto, and Kakunodate. Kakunodate is a small samurai village in northern Japan that has kept itself, I was going to say pure, kept itself historically accurate. So a lot of the stuff's there. I'll show you some photos later. So you get to Tokyo, and you want to get around Tokyo with that new JR pass. Here is a map of all the trains routes in Tokyo. Yes, it's rather complicated. There is one route which is very handy to know. You notice this kind of circle here in the middle? Point to it. So this circle here, that's called the Yamanote line. And I'm not going to describe all the lines. That's the one line that's useful to know. It's kind of the beltway of the trains in Japan. A lot of the places you want to go are on the Yamanote line. Examples being Tokyo Station. That is the big station. In fact, if you've seen shots of like Tokyo, and you see this giant red brick building, I'll show you in a second, that's Tokyo Station. It's very, very big. The nice thing about Tokyo Station is, actually the train from the airport comes into here first, so you'll probably come through here from there. But also, it's so well traveled, there's a shopping mall underneath it. So there's cafes, and there's a bookstore with a manga section. It's like half the size of the entire bookstore, because it's easy to read on the train. And just lots of other stuff in Tokyo Station. So it's a nice sort of jumping off point. The Imperial Palace is also at Tokyo. Note that the Imperial Palace burned down. So the Imperial Palace grounds are there, and a few other buildings are there. But this is a nice sort of half-day trip. North of that is Akihabara, which of course we all care about. And I'll show you more about that later. But it's like 10 minutes north of the Tokyo Station. North of that is Ueno, which is sort of it's a big park with a lot of museums, some temples, things like that, shrines. If you're looking for more kind of high culture, Ueno is a great place to go. And again, I'll show you stuff about this later. Asakusa is near that. This is an older part of town. I actually stayed in Asakusa because the further away you go from Tokyo Station, the cheaper the hotels are, as you can imagine. You know, the further you go towards, here-ish, it gets more expensive. So if you can be a little ways out of the way, you can drop your hotel bill by 30, 40%, and then just take the train, and everything's still within 20 minutes. It's very easy. Way south of that is Odaiba. It's actually a little off the Yamanote line. Odaiba is a man-made island filled with shopping malls and stuff like that. It is absolutely massive. It is where Tokyo Big Sight is, where they do Kamaket. It also has a giant Gundam statue, because this is the kind of thing Japan does. And there's also a river running between Asakusa and Odaiba. Before I went to Japan, I heard this story about, does anyone here know who Leishi Matsumoto is? Captain Harlock's creator, Galaxy Express, that kind of guy. One of the riverboats that goes on this river contacted him and said, you do all this awesome space opera stuff, would you design a boat for us to go up and down this river? So he did. That's not a rendering, that's an actual photograph of the boat. So they built this thing. So I got to Japan, took the train to Tokyo Station, took the trains up to my hotel, exhausted, got to my hotel room, opened the door onto the balcony, which is like this wide, stepped out and saw that. The river is right next to it, and that happens to be the north terminus of this boat that goes between Asakusa and Odaiba. So a very convenient route, very scenic. Characters from Leishi Matsumoto's works talk to you over the intercom, and they have stand-ups for the various stuff he's done, and they serve gelato on board. It's really, really nice stuff. Just a relaxing way of going down to Odaiba in an hour. That's certainly an option, and just wonderful. And then further east is Harajuku and Shibuya. Shibuya is sort of the high fashion area of Tokyo, whereas Harajuku is more the street fashion. So if you're looking for goth-rolly outfits, that's where you go. And then the Ghibli Museum is way further east, just way further out. These are kind of the major things around there. So that's Tokyo Station, if you've ever seen that in a photograph. It was an old bus terminal, which they then converted into this train station. Beautiful, beautiful building. Like I said, a lot of stuff downstairs. It's a great jumping off point for things. The Imperial Palace, as I mentioned, is near there. Beautiful, lots of old historic buildings. But again, it's more of a garden, really, than anything else. It's more grounds to walk around than big buildings to visit. But a great half-day trip. But of course, this is kind of what we all are here for, right? This is Akihabara. To give you an idea of scale, those are balconies. That's a balcony, that's a balcony. Yeah, it's crazy. Awesome. The other thing about Akihabara is it's only about 5 blocks long by 3 blocks deep. It's not big, but it's dense. It's all anime stuff all the time. The first store I walked into, they had model kits. 5 floors of model kits. That's it. And it turns out actually, I later watched a documentary in that store, and they actually rent space in the store for fans to sell off their stuff. So it's kind of like a physical eBay, where folks sort of bring their stuff and say, hey, I'll sell this for, 10,000 yen. And it's there until it sells. All kinds of model kits. Yeah. And they don't use little post-it notes. It's all there. But yeah, it's very cool. It's also rather crowded, being kind of a very otaku-oriented area. They're kind of it's dense with traffic a lot of the time. This was also, of course, the old electronics area. Just a lot of electronic shops. I actually ran out of SD cards while I was there, And I was like, I'm in exactly the right place to run out of SD cards. So I just walked into a store and like, do you have it? Yes. Whatever. Yes, we have it. 64 gig SD, yeah, here you go. And it was like $10. It's like, welcome to Japan. That was pretty awesome. You can also find places there like a Gundam Cafe. This is an actual, yes. This is an actual real thing. They set it up to look kind of like a capital ship in Gundam inside. And you can order stuff off the menu. They have all this stuff. They change the theme, I think it's every month, to a different Gundam timeline. So you can be there for sort of Universal Century World or Gundam Seed World. I was there for Gundam Seed.
I'm sorry.
As an example, one of the what I ordered was what they would serve on the Archangel, like an actual plate of food from the mess hall. And next to it on the menu was a screenshot from the anime series of characters carrying around that. They had gone back to the show, seen what was drawn in there, and that's what you actually bought. You can also get stuff like this. This took me a minute to figure out what this was. These are Gundam wings. Yes. That's just awesome. They cater to otaku like that. It's kind of fun. There are also places like the AKB48 shop next to it, which opened 2 days before I got there. So you can imagine how crowded it was. I did not go inside, partly because it was just wall-to-wall people all the time. But they do have attractions like this. There are also some really neat cultural things in there. So there is I forget the name off the top of my head. An anime industry. There's a little area set up by the anime industry as sort of a mini museum for stuff. And so they set up their storyboards from current shows that folks can kind of walk in and walk around and see. And the cool thing is the shop that's associated with that, I don't know how, but like every single object they sell is something that came out over here in America. And it's totally a coincidence, I'm sure, but I'm like, I recognize that. Which is remarkable because I've watched over 800 different anime series, and over 1,000 DVDs. I recognized maybe 2% of the anime I saw, like in stores over there, and the manga and so forth. Like that's how crazy it is, and that's how much stuff we'd never see. To walk into a store and say, "Oh, yeah, Bubblegum Crisis, yes, thank you." All those things were kind of there. And the other nice thing about Akihabara is because it's just a shopping district, you can go anytime. There's no opening and closing hours. This is actually the approach to Odaiba on that particular on the boat. So you're kind of seeing it through the glass. It is an absolutely absurdly huge place. This is one of the shopping malls there. Imagine like Tyson's 1 and put 4 of them next to each other. And that's one corner of Odaiba. It's just unbelievably huge. There's just tons of space for there. There was one building that was a 3-story, just very large building that was a single department store, just right there. And then you're walking along and you turn the corner and you see this. This was the one moment in my trip when my brain just kind of flipped. It is really weird seeing this in real life because your brain says, that exists in anime, it does not exist in real life, it should not be here. Something's wrong, there's a dimensional portal somewhere, I don't know, but how can you be seeing this right now? And you walk around and you look up. The other fun thing is that seeing the expressions on Japanese people as they come up to the Gundam, and it's like seeing the Enterprise. It's just, oh, here's that thing from my childhood, that's so cool. Everyone was smiling when they saw the Gundam. It's a really neat thing. But yeah, Odaiba, you can absolutely spend a day, and especially very good for shopping. The Sega Museum is there, which has a whole bunch of Sega arcade machines, all sorts of stuff there. There's a tiny little Legoland there. Shops. There's an arcade that has the Gundam Battle Pods in it, so you can play that game. That's pretty awesome. There's just tons and tons of stuff in Odaiba. This is Ueno Park. So again, it's a more historical area, shrines, temples, things like that. Very beautiful place if you're looking for a more traditional Japanese experience. Several museums with stuff going back thousands of years in Japan. And everything's in English as well as Japanese, which is also nice. In general, in Japan, any touristy thing will generally be translated into English. You don't have to worry about that too much. And I stayed in Asakusa near the Sennoji Temple, and I'm putting this just as an example of the kind of stuff you'll see in Japan. That's not the temple, that's the entrance to the temple. That's the temple. That's a person. It's huge. It's this incredibly massive thing. And again, this is cool. They have a little, actually right there. You may have seen this in documentaries. They'll have this giant urn filled with incense that is wafting up outside of the temple. And so you're supposed to walk up to it and waft it over yourself to be blessed by the incense. Everyone who does that smiles. Because again, it's part of culture. It's just something you do, and it's, oh yes, this is a thing we all do. It's just really neat seeing this cultural thing that kind of everyone there appreciates and does. And like one of the other nice things is like, I never felt uncomfortable in any of these places. It wasn't like, what are you doing here? Although it was fun here, actually walking along here, and then walking past a group of elementary school kids, and 2 steps away hearing, Amerikajan, Amerikajan! I am. How could you tell? And I wasn't wearing glass there, so it was just a white guy. But yeah, kind of weird. So moving over to sort of the less otaku areas, Shibuya is again a big fashion district. If you've seen Hachiko, the little dog statue, that's Shibuya Station is where that is. So it's a classic place to meet up and see people. And yes, there were Japanese schoolgirls everywhere meeting up with other Japanese schoolgirls because that's where you meet up. And there's lots of fashion areas. Also, the Tokyo Disney Store is here, which is kind of interesting because they do a lot of very Japanese Disney stuff. It's like, here's Minnie Mouse in a Maiko outfit. Awesome. Because it's only going to be sold in Japan. Then you can head over to Harajuku. Yep. This is what you see everywhere in Harajuku. This is the more street fashion area. It's interesting because it's basically it's really just like this one block here you see on the side is pretty much all of Harajuku. There are other parts of that district, but in terms of the actual fashion, it all happens on that one street. So you can visit in an hour and take some photos and everything's cool. But it is also just very, very different than kind of what we used to, and kind of this intense experience. And you can go to the stores if you want to, although you can kind of look like a creep. Obviously there's Mount Fuji. I actually did not go to Mount Fuji during this trip, partly because I had trouble scheduling it. The issue is you're going to need to spend a couple hours on a bus heading out there, and then you go up and then a couple hours on a bus heading back. So it's very much a day trip, and apparently the problem is Mount Fuji is sloped so gradually that while you're on Mount Fuji, you can't see Mount Fuji. So you can see the countryside, which is beautiful, and they say like it's worth doing, but it's not majestic in the way you think it would. So that's for my next trip, but it's certainly doable, and there are tons and tons of bus trips and day trips available at Mount Fuji. So it's a very easy thing to do if you want to go. I did go to Kakunodake. So this is a small, hello, back. So this is a small sort of samurai village, north of Japan. This was kind of a weird experience for me. First off, part of it is you think, okay, I'm finally getting away from all of the anime stuff. Much as I love it, this is going to be the traditional sort of experience of non-otaku in Japan. And you walk off the train, and there's Totoro and a cat bus. Turns out the art director for Totoro graduated from the junior high in this town. So there's a little commemoration of that. But no, Kakunodake, basically, it was settled by a number of samurai who, as their lords shifted away from sort of traditional samurai duties, and they had to find something to do, they shifted actually into working on the local cherry wood that's there. So you can find lots of beautiful cherry boxes and chopsticks and so forth that they became known for. And so there's a whole neighborhood in town which has all these traditional samurai homes. And the town decided explicitly that we're not going to change that. We're going to keep everything there exactly the way it was. So you step foot in here, and it's like stepping back 150 years, and it's just there. You're back. The other cool thing is some of the houses are open. You can walk into them. This is another interesting thing. So I walked in, obviously take your shoes off, and then another nice thing about being a foreigner in Japan is like somebody walked over to me and said, "Do you speak English?" Oh no, sorry. Do you understand Japanese? Because is that me? No. because for some reason they figured you might not know Japanese. You know, it's pretty clear. So he comes up and I said, not really. He said, I speak a little English. And so he took me around the thing, and he spoke, passable English, and showed me around the house, and showed me the main family room of the house, and the kimono set behind there. And he said, yeah, my grandfather would have been there, and so forth. And grandfather? And he took me around a little bit, and he said, oh yeah, by the way, I am the current head of the household. I am like a 15th generation samurai, technically. Hi, okay? And he gave me the tour. I'm like, this is awesome. And like, he's dressed like I am now. I mean, you wouldn't know. It's not like, yes, I have my sword. But he just this like 40-year-old guy who was doing tours of the house. And they like live in the back of the house. But he showed me around, he showed me other different parts of the house, and then encouraged me to give donations at the end, which is kind of like, oh, sure, please. It's so sad that you need donations. Beautiful place. The other odd thing about Kakunodate is I remember walking down the street one morning, and there was a kid from the local junior high walking a dog the other way, and he looked at me and just... And I realized I was probably the first non-Japanese person you'd ever seen in real life. It's just that remote of a town. You just don't see that. It is a hot spring town, so I did stay in a traditional ryokan inn. When you go there, you go in, and again, fortunately, someone on staff spoke English, and she took me down, and sure enough, the change of clothes is there in the closet. You change into those clothes, and they have there are no chairs. You sit on the floor. That's how things work. They also had hot spring bathing, including mixed bathing, none of which I did. I chickened out, I fully admit. Although one of the reasons was that they had an ensuite bath. This is one of the things you'll find in a lot of these places. This is a tub just for this room. So you can go do whatever you need there, and you can get used to it. It should not be good because there are there's a certain procedure for how to go in, and you wash yourself here, and things like that. So I kind of got used to how that works, so that when I actually do that the next time I go to Japan, I will not look like a complete idiot, which is kind of nice. Okay, moving over to Kyoto. So this is one of the big temples in Kyoto. So Kyoto is the old capital of Japan. So it has a lot of the older culture of Japan, and a lot of these giant temples. So this is the largest freestanding wooden structure in the world. It is slightly smaller than the temple that's almost identical to it, kind of nearby. What happened was when the first shogun took over power, he wanted to show off that he was not a terrible person. So he donated tons of money to the Buddhist monks in Kyoto to build a giant temple. They had just gotten all the money they needed to make a giant temple. So what do you do in that situation? You build two giant temples. So these are like 1 block away from each other, these giant things. Like we have the cash, and we're not going to disobey the shogun. Hey, he wanted the thing. So they're just absolutely massive. And again, that's a person. And the other weird thing is you take off your shoes, and you step on these things, and people have been stepping on these things for 600 years. It is that historical. People have been stepping back and forth on this for all that time. It's amazing. The other nice thing about Kyoto is there are lots of traditional places to go. So this is an actual samurai's residence that has been given over to the public as a public garden. So you can tour the gardens, walk around. It's I think about 20 acres or so of completely traditional Japanese gardens that you can walk around and explore. You can't go into the house, but it's beautiful. You just do whatever you want there, just wander around. Let me see here. Kyoto is a place where I would recommend doing some bus tours, because Kyoto being older, it certainly has train lines going around, but it's a little harder to get from the train lines to individual temples and places in Kyoto. You take a train to a bus line, take a bus there. So it is advantageous in Kyoto to have a few things worked out, especially because us going there, we probably don't have a hit list of the 10 temples we want to visit. we may, but it's a lot easier to say, okay, I know I want to visit some temples, let me see what's easy to get to and schedule it out and plan that out with like a bus tour or whatever. Generally what will happen is a bus tour will depart and return to a particular hotel in Kyoto. So you just find one that's near you and say, okay, I just have to get there by 10 a.m. and then we're taken care of. When you get there and go to the train stations, you're going to see signs like this and probably have a heart attack like I did. How on earth am I going to tell what's going to happen? Fortunately, those are electronic and they do change over to English every few seconds. So it is actually pretty easy to take care of. What this is actually showing you is that the Kodama train, the Kodama sort of line, arrives at 9:09. It's going to Tokyo. It stops at all stations, so it's a slower line than the Nozomi, which is an express line, and those are when they leave. And you'll notice they also say non-reserved cars. So again, those are the cars that anyone can get on. They're not no reserved seats. It's also an indication that if you see this is car 6, you can get on it. If it's car 9, don't walk on unless you have a ticket for car 9. And it'll explain all of that. Also, when they say 9:09, they're effing serious. It arrives at 9:09. It'll leave like at 9:11. As of I think 2010, the average late time for a train in Japan was 56 seconds for the entire year. Yes, they take this very seriously because, as they explained, they have trains running so often to so many different places, they just can't afford to have a backlog. It just keeps on going. What are you doing? Sorry. It was trying to Google train stations in Japan. I love that. And moreover, you will see tiled into the train platform are colored lines going to the train platform because when the train comes in, the door will stop there. And it'll open and you'll get on. And people actually, they just line up right there and sure enough, doors open. It's that efficient. It's amazing. Awesome. And the Shinkansen are wonderful. I mean, they're fast and they're comfortable and they're everything you've heard of. Also in the train stations, when you don't have blue electronic signs, they will have English on the signs below. You'll notice even, they're hard to see here, even on the printed signs, they'll also put English below there too. So you can at least get around and see stuff. Generally speaking, every Japan Rail desk will have somebody who can speak English. Actually, not generally. They do. Even in Kakurodate, they had somebody there who spoke English. So they make sure that is there everywhere you go. So you can certainly find somebody. And certainly, like at Narita Airport, which is where most of the international flights come in and out of, pretty much everyone there speaks English because there's so many, so much of that coming in and out. And very good English, actually. One of the cool things getting there is that I went in and I got my JR pass, and the woman asked me, where are you staying? And, oh, this is polite. Well, in this place in a little north and so forth. Oh, where exactly? She pulls out a map, draws out, okay, you're going to take this train to here, this train to this station. And she wrote out in English all the stations I had to go to, and then reserved seats for me on all of those trains. Said, here you go, enjoy. Even further, she said, okay, a train leaves in like 7 minutes or in 17 minutes. Do you want to rush down there and get the one in 7 minutes, or wait a little while in 17 minutes? It's like, thank you for asking. that's really nice. So yeah, they're very comfortable with figuring out how to kind of make folks comfortable. So those are the big things that I kind of wanted to make sure I covered. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and stuff like that. Do you guys have anything you want to ask me, or anything you want to kind of cover or talk about? Because I have plenty of things. Yes, sir.
What would you say the average person taking a week-long trip to Japan would have to budget?
Budget for a week-long trip in Japan. The plane ticket's going to be somewhere around $1,500. Food is actually not that expensive, so it was, for me, maybe, well, another side thing. I had a sensitive stomach, so I was not adventurous when it came to food over there. So I ate a lot of convenience store food, and that was, $7-10 for a meal. I mean, with all the other stuff in there. So what you normally expect there, hotels are going to be maybe $100 to $120 a night if you're staying sort of outside of Tokyo, near Tokyo Station. Closer in, it's going to be more like $150 to $200 a night or more. And a ryokan is going to be $150 or more a night. But that's definitely worth it for like one night at least. And then the JR Pass, which is again like maybe $300, depending on how long you're going to be there for. I think it's maybe like $250, I think, for the 7-day pass. So yeah, I would say somewhere in the $3,000 range, roughly. And then from there, it's however much you want to spend money on, really. But it's very much up to you. I also did not go to the Ghibli Museum, by the way, and the reason was you have to go to a Lawson's convenience store in Japan, go to a particular kiosk at the Lawson's convenience store, use the menus that are only in Japanese to buy a ticket for a particular day and time. You show up there at that day and time, hand in your ticket, and they let you in. I was not able to make all of those things happen in my trip, unfortunately. One of the reasons why a lot of tours will actually package that into the trip. They'll say, okay, we're going to go to the Ghibli Museum Thursday at 4 p.m. and we'll prearrange all the tickets for you. Otherwise, it is difficult because Ghibli doesn't care. Everyone goes, so they can make it as hard as they want to. You know, it's fine for them. That's just kind of the way things work over there. Anyway, yes, sir.
Question, did you book your hotel stays individually, or did you would it be better to do a hotel, or did you just kind of find booking yours was not too much inconvenient or that much more expensive?
Yeah, I did them separately. My thing is I like flexibility, so I was much more interested in just doing something. There are tours that'll make it a little cheaper, but it's really hard to get much cheaper on airfare. So you're going to pay that much, and then hotels again it's going to be a little cheaper, but yeah. So you know, I found it was so easy on these sites to say, okay, here are 3 nights, here are 3 nights, and you know, the other nice thing is you receive all your stuff in English, you receive your confirmation number, and the same goes over here. You know, you have up to 24 hours in advance to cancel. So that turned out better for me. Yeah. Other questions? This is your only chance. Come on. Surely you have questions about Japan. Yes?
Do you think it's a good idea to like meet up with meet someone online and like befriend them so you could stay with them?
Especially if you're a 14-year-old girl, definitely do that. Yeah, kidding. It's certainly an option. Crime is much lower in Japan than it is internationally. Although the numbers are kind of underreported. It's certainly something you can do I would say it is about as dangerous as doing the same thing over here in America.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same kind of risk where, you know, if you've never met the person before, it's just like, hey, can I crash your place? Yes. You probably want to do a little bit more diving into it than that. Yeah, I would say it's you know, not an insane option. Yeah.
Or actually I found something online or heard about something where you meet this family online, and you work for them over there, and they pay for all your care needs and all that, and let you stay with them.
I have heard of that, yes. That certainly happens. That's a perfectly respectable thing. I basically just dig into the company, make sure you know what you're getting into in terms of what the work is. Okay, yeah, there we go. But yeah, that's only way. The downside of that is that you spend much of your vacation working.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of balance. So like if you're going to do that, I would do your best to make it last as long as possible, so you have more time in the evenings. But yeah, it's certainly not. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The people that couldn't go with you, did you show them pictures and were they jealous afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the one guy I was going to go with, who backed out at the last minute, he's ex-military and he was stationed there for like 3 years. So, you know, he knew what it was like, so it wasn't that bad. But yes, there's a lot of, like, well, you didn't actually do anything. What can I do? Other questions? Anything you want to know?
More stories?
War stories. I was miserable for the first 2 days. It was, okay, so I got, so Narita Airport is kind of like any other airport. You know, obviously the signage is different, but it's very much an airport. You get on the train, you leave the station, and you're in Japan. Like, it's rice paddies, it's, you know, the little, the little trucks up on gravel roads. All the stuff you see in anime is suddenly there. I will never forget that moment. It was something. It also helps after a 14-hour flight, whatever it is. Finally. And then it's like an hour train ride into Tokyo Station. And then again, Tokyo Station it's foreign, but it's kind of like New York. And then I found my way to the train station right next, like 2 blocks away from my hotel. I found my way walked up to the street level onto effing Mars. Every sign was different. Every layout was different. There were no social or cultural cues that my brain could hang a hat on. It was that different. And of course, no one speaking English, which doesn't help either. Your brain is suddenly assaulted with all this different stuff. And I had no idea where I was either. Because I think this is the place and I don't recognize it. And again, all the street signs are not in English. So that took some getting used to because it was an assault on the senses. I would leave my hotel room around 10 a.m. every day, come back around dinner time, and I could not go out again because I had been exposed to so many new things. My brain was exhausted and just shut down. I ended up spending a fair amount of time watching Japanese evening television, which is very interesting. Fascinating stuff. And reruns of Bewitched. Why not?
Nick and Night?
Yeah, I think it's still airing in Japan. Subtitled. Actually, yeah, it was subtitled. It wasn't dubbed, which would have been even more interesting. Anyway, it was also interesting going in there and, I tried to check, obviously, when anime was airing. Now, the vast majority of it airs at 2 a.m. So I wasn't going to, push myself to watch too much of that. I watched an episode of Fairy Tail, an episode of Pokemon, I think. And that was the only stuff that aired in any time slot that I could watch. And if I hadn't watched those two things, you would not have known that there was anime on television. There are no other ads for anime on television unless you're watching another anime series. It's completely ghettoized. It's its own little area of the television station. So that was interesting to see. As I mentioned, I got hit by a number of storms while I was there. Fortunately, I was not where they hit, so it was just rainy, basically. It's fun, turning on the TV station. Hi, here's number 1, and here's number 2, and here's number 3 heading in. But yeah, for the first 2 days, I would have spent $2,000 for a transporter to take me home. That instant. It was that foreign. And I was glad I was there, but it was so overwhelming. Gotcha, thank you. So, after the 2 days, I loved every second, and I can't wait to go back. Absolutely. It just took me a while to orient myself there. Other interesting war stories. I did get on the wrong train once, and nobody said anything. So I just got off and got on the right train, but everyone's polite, so you wouldn't do that. It could be difficult sometimes to get around the various train stations, just because, especially the train station, one of the train stations I was in was under construction, so the signage was kind of weird. They do an amazingly good job of making everything functional and clear. You probably won't see mistakes, but you'll see things that just aren't there anymore, and you kind of need to figure out what's going on. There was the kid in Katsucon who thought I had horns on my head. The woman in the ryokan was the model of politeness, but obviously was unsure if I knew how to comport myself in a ryokan. If I understood to be quiet, if I understood to change into the ryokan clothing. But she wouldn't come out and say that, obviously. So it was, do you need anything? Do you know where things are? And she was wonderfully felicitous in terms of giving me information, but you could tell that, is this going to go really poorly? kind of thought in the back of her mind. It's unfortunate that didn't go anywhere at all. Like I said, no weird food, unfortunately. So nothing was, oh, actually, I take that back. I was at Tokyo Station, I did lunch, and I walked out, and there was a whole bunch of restaurants. Walked into an Italian restaurant and ordered the shrimp scampi with spaghetti, and got that. And it was shrimp, whole, with legs and eyes and everything else, right there on the plate looking at me. So that was kind of hard to eat. And it's like, but what do you do? Tasted good. I didn't eat a lot of them though. It's like, but that's the other thing is that you have a cuisine that is fundamentally different from ours, and so a fundamentally different expectations of things. Their Western-style breakfast is like no Western breakfast I've ever eaten in my life, but it is an egg and a bun product, and stuff like that. Where it's like, everything is kind of there, but none of it is anything like what we would expect. But it's there. I don't think of anything else sort of remarkable. Odaiba was amazing. Partly because of the Gundam, but also just partly because you just walk for half an hour and you're still passing shopping malls. It's just crazy. And the fact that the service everywhere was perfect. Like, they asked you questions when you needed to, and then they didn't. And if you wanted something, they would wrap it, they would do anything you wanted to. It was just impeccable service everywhere. Yeah, those are the major, exciting things. Nothing too crazy. Other than getting the hotel room at the last minute, that was it. Kind of moment. Any other questions? We have time for one more. Yes.
So do you think it would be a good investment to take 2 years of a Japanese class at college or something?
Absolutely. I can speak probably a couple of dozen Japanese words, and I can recognize about that many. Just the kind of stuff you get from anime and a few lessons. And with that, I was able to get by. It was perfectly fine. But certainly, the more you know, the easier it is. And especially with, actually, there's another thing is, it's fine to know like konnichiwa, but things like left and right, those are way more useful. So directions, northeast, southwest, that kind of stuff is way more useful to learn than You're not going to use baka a lot in Japan. So just kind of be aware of that. If you guys have any other questions, we're going to hang out outside here. I also have more handouts, if you didn't get any, sort of notes on what's going on. Otherwise, thank you very much for showing up to the panel. Have a great Katsucon.